While the Mets' 7-game winning streak was snapped on Monday, there were some big highlights in that game, particularly for Mark Vientos and Ronny Mauricio, who made a statement, and that statement is, "Don't trade us."
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Merrill, Ryan Finkelstein. I've covered the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. The only podcast covers the Mets 7 days a week throughout the regular season. If you want to find some of my written work, you can do so over at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Now, before we talk about the game on Monday night, I want to talk about Mark Vientos and how his name has been swirling around in trade rumors for days now. We talked about it on yesterday's show, how Bob Nightingale of USA Today reported that the White Sox want Mark Vientos in any trade that includes Luis Robert. And I talked about why I didn't think that that was realistic for the Mets to trade Vientos for a guy in Robert who hasn't played well in the last 2 years. Granted, he is turning it on right now, trying to get traded, but he has largely been bad. And also, he pretty much amounts to being a rental because he has a $20 million club option for next season that I think any team that trades for him is likely going to decline and pay a $2 million buyout. So I didn't necessarily see that trade fit. But then Andy Martino today comes out with some more reports, and they just are keeping Vientos' name circulating in the news cycle. Here's what he said. The Mets have been discussing Mark Vientos in trade talks this week, and rival executives believe that the team is willing to move him, league sources say. Teams have asked about Vientos, Brett Baty, and Ronny Mauricio. The Mets are not actively trying to rid themselves of any of those young infielders, but given Baty's recent production and newfound versatility, rival execs have come away with the sense that Vientos is more available than the others. So you take that report, and I think, and we'll talk about it a little bit more in the next segment as far as Vientos' availability, that it makes some sense in regards to the fact that you have Baty and Mauricio that are playing well. You have a president of baseball operations that values defense, and those two guys are more versatile defenders who are obviously more capable of playing a good defensive third base. And maybe they think that with Starling Marte swinging the bat well, Vientos is more expendable than those other guys. But as I discussed on the show yesterday, I'm very apprehensive to see the Mets move Mark Vientos. And Vientos showed you why in this game on Monday night, because when you get Mark Vientos with a chip on his shoulder, or at this point, maybe a block on his shoulder again, you get the best version of Mark Vientos. We saw it last season. He comes up when Starling Marte's on paternity, hits the huge home run, has to go right back down, gets back up, and just muscles his way to a starting third base job. Just did not take no for an answer. He made the most of every single start and got to the point where he ripped that job away from Brett Baty and never let go of it, and hit 27 home runs in 111 regular season games before hitting 5 home runs in October and being arguably the Mets' best hitter in the playoffs. He was outstanding. Vientos still has that in there, and he reminded us all of that in this game. With all of that in the background, he comes up in the second inning and helps the Mets score their first run. Jeff McNeil is the Mets' first base runner, drew a 1-out walk in the second. Mark Vientos hits a hard ground ball up the middle that advances Jeff McNeil to third. Brett Baty has a professional at bat. It's a fly ball to left to give the Mets their first run on a sacrifice fly. Now, Frankie Montas would work through a bases-loaded situation in the second inning, then ran into trouble again in the third, hit a batter, walked a batter, gave him a base hit that scored a run to tie the game, got a strikeout to get out of that jam. Fourth inning, Jeff McNeil draws another walk, and Mark Vientos hits one over the wall in right field. The problem, Fernando Tatis Jr. makes an unbelievable play and robs the home run. Vientos would get a shot, though, an inning later. You had Brandon Nimmo and Francisco Lindor each get base hits. Juan Soto beats out a would-be double play ball and then steals second. Pete Alonso strikes out, so you got a vacant base at first when Jeff McNeil comes up. They decided to not pitch to McNeil. They intentionally walked McNeil to get to Vientos, and just like he did in Game 2 of the NLCS, Mark Vientos took that personally. He has a great at-bat, works himself into a full count, gets a fastball up and away at 97 miles per hour, and boy, did he not miss it. Crushes it 4 rows deep in right field where Fernando Tatis Jr. just can't get to it. And he stared at it the whole way, hit that baseball, knew it was gone, and watched it go as he hits a huge grand slam to give the Mets a 5-1 lead. Now, only problem is Frankie Montas and Huascar Brazaban combined for a complete meltdown in the following half inning as they gave up all 4 runs and then one, and the Padres took a 6-5 lead. But that does not take away from Vientos' homer. It was a really impressive blast. And again, it came one at bat in one inning after he would have left the yard if there was a different guy playing right field. And mind you, again, his first at bat, base hit, I believe it was 100 miles per hour off the bat, hard ground ball up the middle. Final at bat of the game, he hit it again hard, 96 miles per hour off the bat, just got completely under it and flew out. But that's the Mark Vientos that makes you think twice about trading him. And it comes after what we saw from Ronny Mauricio on Sunday, having the monster 4-for-4 game. And then Mauricio has another moment. So as I mentioned, Montas, Brazaban, they completely melted down. Montas gave up 3 hits to start the 5th inning, including a 2-run homer to Luis Arraez. Got a pop up, then gave up a double, gets pulled. He gave up 5 runs on 8 hits and 2 walks, struck out 3, went 4 1/3. Brazaban comes on, gets a pop up. Then Pete Alonso makes a diving stop down the first base line, and Brazaban does not cover in time, blows it, a run scores on that play. Then he gives it 2 more hits, and just like that, the Padres took that lead. Rico Garcia kept the game close, 2 strong innings out of the bullpen, 4 strikeouts. He continues to be a huge part of this bullpen lately. Ryan Stanek, a 1-2-3 8th inning. In the 9th inning, with the Mets trailing by a run, Ronny Mauricio delivers another clutch home run, covered a 98-mile-per-hour fastball that was on the black, really, on the outside part of the plate. And with those long arms, gets a barrel on it and pulls it out to deep right center field for a 415-foot home run to tie the game. So, again, you have Vientos with the huge home run. You have Mauricio with a huge home run. I think these guys should just stay put. We'll talk about that more in a minute. Unfortunately, another PFP mistake cost the Mets in the bottom of the 9th. Gregory Soto came on to try to keep the game tied, gave up a leadoff single. Jose Iglesias attempts a sac bunt. Soto tries to get the lead runner at second, and he very well could have if he made an accurate throw, but his throw was nowhere near the bag. Lindor did a great job just catching it and keeping it from the outfield. But that kept both runners safe, runners at first and second with 1 out, or actually nobody out, Then another bunt attempt. Soto actually made a good play on this one, was able to get to it quickly and flip it to Mauricio at third base to get the lead runner. He then picked up a strikeout, so nearly got out of the jam, but he gave a base hit to Elias Diaz that cost the Mets and allowed the Padres to walk it off, snapping the Mets' 7-game winning streak. Had Soto made the first play cleanly, maybe he gets out of the inning, maybe the Mets win in extras. Regardless, though, you have some big moments there by Mark Vientos and Ronny Mauricio, and as we still are fixated on the trade deadline, what does that mean for the New York Mets decisions? Is there really still a world where Mark Vientos gets traded in a couple of days? I'll talk about that more here in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Day Hue, and so is this hat. For Mets fans like me, this one hits the mark. Game Day Hue makes clean, no logo gear with team-inspired colorways for every pro and college fan base. It's all about letting your colors speak for you. No giant logos, just smart, versatile style that works on game day, on the course, or anywhere in between. If you're a Mets fan and a Knicks fan, 2 for the price of 1 when you get this hat. It pairs perfectly with my usual gear. It doesn't replace my team's logo stuff. It just adds to the lineup. And it's not just about the hats. You can also check out their split shade gloves made for the golf course. The perfect gift for the fan that has everything. Right now, you can get 15% off with the code MLB15 at GameDayHue.com. That's GameDayHue, HUE.com. The code even stacks on bundle deals, so now's the time to load up. Let your colors talk, because colors speak louder than words. That's GameDayHue.com, code MLB15. If you're watching on YouTube today, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Help us get closer to our next goal of 14,000 subscribers, which I would love to get to by the trade deadline. We are so close. So I really appreciate all of you continue to subscribe. And also, when you do subscribe, make sure you hit that notification bell so you are notified anytime we go live or an episode drops. I'll be going live if the Mets make any trades this week. As soon as I can, I will get a show up for you. And then also, Chris Schubert does our Locked On Mets postcast at the end of every game. So if you want that instant reaction to a Mets win or loss, you can come to the channel and find that with our Locked On Mets postcast. Now let's talk a little bit more about these trade rumors swirling around Mark Vientos. I've told you why I want to see Vientos stay. I have been a huge proponent of Mark Vientos dating back to his time as a prospect. And if he gets dealt, that's one that's going to hurt. Okay, I'm not going to love the idea of Vientos getting traded really in any deal. You know, I'd prefer the Mets to just trade prospects at this point, and I've talked about that on the show over the last couple of days. But as Martino's report comes out, and as I had the day to sort of chew on it, I started to talk myself into it under certain circumstances. And the reason why I did is because if you think about the long-term vision of this team, if the plan is to give Pete Alonso after the season a 5-year deal and say, you know what, you're a homegrown Met, you're a lifelong Met, you're going to have number 20 retired, you have the home run record, we're not going to mess around and play a game of chicken again. Let's just find a deal that works with both sides. Let's get this thing done. If that's your plan, the front office and Steve Cohen, if your belief is Mark Vientos is not going to have any shot at being the first baseman in the future, forgetting the fact that he looked pretty bad over there the other day, but if he had a full off season, I think he could get himself a little more comfortable at the position. But regardless, if you are looking at your future with the intent of keeping Pete Alonso, well, you have Mauricio, you have Beatty. I don't know if long-term Vientos is your third baseman. Most likely, his positional home is not having one and is being a DH. My voice cracked there. We'll leave that in the show. But that's where you're at with Vientos, a slow-footed DH. With that said, a guy that can still really impact the game with his bat, and that's why you don't trade him for anything. But I could understand if it's the right deal, and the right deal is not Luis Robert. It's not Harrison Bader. It's not Cedric Mullins. It's not a rental center fielder. But let's just say you're on the phone right now with the Marlins a bunch, and you're talking about their starting pitchers with control, Edward Cabrera or Sandy Alcantara. And they like Mark Vientos. They're looking at a team that is trying to build a core, and they think Mark Vientos is clearly a big league bat that they can slide in at third base or first base and, you know, just give them another slugger in the middle of their lineup that can help them as they continue their rebuild. If they are very interested in Vientos and you're getting a starting pitcher with multiple years of control, I can start to work my way around the idea of trading Vientos. You know, Joe Ryan's another example with the Twins. If you get a closer with control, like Joan Duran or David Bednar, maybe I could be talked into it. I think with Bednar, because it's a year and a half of control, I don't know. I really don't know if I'd be in on it. I feel like you'd almost want to get Dennis Santana in that trade too, and then it'd be a little more palatable to give up Vientos. But if you believe that getting David Bednar is the missing piece to your bullpen, that's going to help you win a World Series, I can get talked into it. I can. I think that you're going to lose the trade in the long run because Vientos, you know, over the next 4 years after this might hit 100 plus home runs. But if you're going to struggle to find him at bats, you're also doing him a solid, sending him to an organization that wants him and will prioritize him and will play him every single day. So I can start to get my head around it. And the one also trade that I really do kind of like is if you could talk to the Astros and they have a need at third base because Isaac Paredes just hit the IL and might be out for the season. And if you can float Vientos and if they decide that they'd be willing to move Brian Abreu and backfill their bullpen because they have such a good bullpen already, and they decide to trade Brian Abreu with a year and a half of control, a guy that's been lights out in the playoffs before, that would intrigue me a lot. But again, you'd still have to pull the trigger on trading a guy that could help you this season. And ultimately, the Mets have a deep enough farm system where they don't have to trade from their MLB roster. And yes, sure, if you were to get a center fielder, how are you juggling all these guys? It would be difficult. If you're going to play Luis Robert every day in center field, you got to get Jeff McNeil at bats. So what do you do? How do you fit everybody into the picture? Two ways. one way. You acquire Luis Robert to platoon with Jeff McNeil, and maybe you end up doing the unthinkable and you DFA Tyrone Taylor, which I wouldn't necessarily want to see the Mets do, but you'd have to decide the best way to utilize your roster. Since they probably wouldn't do that, maybe all you're doing is maybe you are burning that option on Luis Angel Acuna, because if he spends any more time in Syracuse, he will lose that option. But you know what? You're trying to win now. Mauricio's helping you. Maybe you just send Acuna down. You'd have Robert and Taylor for speed anyway, so you wouldn't necessarily need Acuna as much, and he's not getting a ton of playing time. So maybe that makes sense. Maybe you decide that you're going to see what you have in Robert. You're going to have Jeff McNeil play with regularity at second base. You want to see Mark Vientos get a bunch of at-bats. So tough demotion. You send Mauricio to Syracuse for a month. You call him up as a September call-up, and you roll from there. There are ways to get around the fact that you have all these guys. I've been hearing some talking heads say, oh, the Mets have to trade one of these young guys. They have to trade one of these infielders. They don't have to do anything. They can keep all these guys. They have two guys with options in Mauricio and Acuna to make room on this roster. And again, they always could, if they wanted to, get rid of a guy in Tyrone Taylor who is awesome in that clubhouse, an amazing defender. I don't think they would do it, but if you're trying to win, you always could. The other thing they could do is they could capitalize on installing Marte's improved value and deal him. I don't think they'll do that because I think Marte is too big of a leader on this team. But again, all these options are at their disposal. Ultimately, I just think the best move for the Mets is to hold. I really do. The other name that they were linked to today was Brandon Lau, second baseman for the Rays. Has a lot of thump, 19 home runs and 50 RBIs this season, has an 800 OPS, hitting 269, 320 on base, 420 slug. My issue with it, terrible defender. Minus 12 defensive run saves, minus 10 outs above average. I think he's probably more your DH rather than your second baseman. And yes, I think it might be a club option. Let me look up the contract, but I don't even necessarily love the deal at this point. I mean, yes, Lau is a good player, but yeah, $11.5 million option. I guess he would probably be your DH is how you would do it, but I don't know. I'm not the biggest of fans of that trade. Granted, he does add some thump into your lineup, and you always could essentially, again, demote Mauricio and have a proven MLB veteran as that left-handed complement to your infield. Maybe you play Lau a little bit at second base and have Beatty play more at third. I mean, there are ways that it can certainly be justifiable to make that trade. But part of me just wants to see these guys keep playing. There's something fun about these young Mets guys who have gone through it. I've sort of joked a little bit about this on the show. They were the baby Mets, now they're the grown Mets. These guys have developed, and they are getting to the point where they can really contribute. And I think now that you have a lot of the noise quiet, especially once you get past the deadline, and it's just about winning games for each other, I could see this team really going off, especially with all the home games they have in August. I just, the more I think about it, sure, Luis Robert, we saw what he did. The highlights were circulating tonight. You had a 2-run homer off of Christopher Sanchez against the Phillies. Helped the Mets, certainly, because the White Sox beat the Phillies. So they didn't lose any ground in the division today. But hits a 2-run homer, makes a diving catch. Yeah, you can see the vision of how he can help. But I don't know. There's part of me that just gets to a point where I say, you know what? I'm enjoying watching Brett Beatty at second, Mauricio at third, and Jeff McNeil playing center field. And I'm kind of cool with it. So we'll see. We'll see what the Mets decide to do. But what I want to talk about in the final segment is their starting pitching. Frankie Montas did not have a great start. Do the Mets make a move in response to what they've seen from their rotation over this past week? We're going to go through that a little bit here to close out the show in just a minute. If you're an everydayer that always tunes into the show, make sure to become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks from the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. Take part in our Locked On Mets sign photo giveaways, and you get a lamp graphic sent to your phone each day so you know in the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find a link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Now, Frankie Montas has made 6 starts for the New York Mets. 3 have been good. 3 have been bad, where he's given up 4 or more earned runs. He is very hit or miss. You see the flashes. You see how good the fastball can be. But if he doesn't have that splitter, and he did not have it in his start tonight, he can become very one-dimensional. That splitter keeps you honest on the fastball. But if it's not competitive, if he's spiking it and guys can just lay off, if they can start to eliminate that pitch because it's starting too low and they're just able to identify, oh, that's going to be a splitter and that's going to be in the dirt, and they're just taking it. Well, then he's got the fastball. He can obviously throw his sinker. He's got, the sweeper. But when Montas is at his best, it's when that split is working with his fastball, where he can really go north-south and dominate hitters. And we haven't seen enough of that. Granted, he's 6 starts in. It could come, but it's a question mark. Kodai Senga, I'm not too worried about the starts we've seen coming off of the injury. He's still working his way back. And I really do think that he will find himself into that rhythm, and hopefully come the playoff time, he could be a huge contributor. Same thing with Sean Manaea. But when you have the health risk of anytime Kodai Senga runs to first base, the entire fan base collectively holds their breath. And with Manaea, he's pitching with a bone spur in his elbow. Could those guys be fine, make it through October, and lead the Mets to a World Series? Hopefully. But you don't know. And then you have Clay Holmes, who I talked about him after his last start. Feels like he is fatigued. And I don't know if you can really count on him to pitch his way through this season and into the playoffs. The one guy that you have faith in right now to start a playoff game is David Peterson. But can you count on 3 of the other 4 to be ready to be part of a playoff rotation? Could you even count on 2 of the other 4 to be in a playoff rotation? That's what David Stearns, this front office, has to figure out. Now, you do have a little more depth because you have Brandon Sproat and Nolan McLean, who are making a push towards the big leagues in AAA. And you have Paul Blackburn, who is in rehab purgatory. He went 6 1/3 on Sunday, allowed just 1 run on 5 hits and a walk, struck out 6. Now he has thrown 44 1/3 innings pitched in the minor leagues this year, 31 1/3 of them coming in Syracuse, where he's made 6 starts and it's a 2.30 ERA. So he's one of the guys that can actually pitch in Syracuse. But how much do you have faith in Blackburn being able to start a playoff game this year? I certainly don't. And yes, he might give you some depth, but if you go out there and you acquire a couple arms for your bullpen, you're going to be locked into a point where you don't even have room for Blackburn on the roster. I think there's a good chance that Blackburn gets traded. Now, if the Mets are able to pull off a trade with the Diamondbacks to get Zach Gallen and Merrill Kelly, I think you can easily include Paul Blackburn in that trade, and they would just like a guy that can make starts for them to close out the year and just help them get through the remainder of the season. I think you could probably do that in really any trade for a starting pitcher where Blackburn's a rental. He doesn't cost too much, especially with some of these guys who have big salaries, like a Sandy Alcantara. You can just sort of slide Blackburn into the trade, give them a guy that can make starts for the final 2 months of the season, and maybe offset salaries a little bit. But I don't think you can count on Blackburn to say, oh, yeah, he's going to be in the starting rotation down the stretch. So, again, it sort of feels like the Mets are in a position where adding a starting pitcher who could take the ball in a playoff game is pretty important. But those rentals in Arizona, Zach Gallen and Merrill Kelly, they are almost the only rental starting pitchers that are definitely going to be moved, or seemingly are going to be moved, who you feel confident starting a playoff game. There's really not a lot else out there, especially with Seth Lugo getting that contract extension like we talked about on the show yesterday. You have those guys. You have Mitch Keller. You have Luis Severino. We've talked about Keller. We talked about Severino on this show. I don't love either of their fits because I don't like either of their contracts. So it really starts to narrow in my eyes to the D-backs guys and the Marlins guys. Can you get one of those 2 rentals? That's probably the most ideal situation. I've talked about it on the show in the past. The Mets have so many pitchers that are under contract and so many pitching prospects. They don't really need to go out and get an arm with control because they have prospects that are waiting in the wings. They have Sean Manaea, Kodai Senga, Frankie Montas, and Clay Holmes all signed to contracts for next season. Same goes with David Peterson. He's going to be in his final year of arbitration. And I'd like the Mets to even extend David Peterson. So going out and getting Edward Cabrera and paying an obscene price for it, that doesn't make sense to me. Now, Sandy is an interesting one because the Marlins are saying they're not going to move him unless the price is right. Well, that's what you're going to say. His last start, he went 7 scoreless. He's going to pitch tonight on Tuesday. So we'll see how he throws the ball. I think a lot of people will be watching that start. A lot of scouts, certainly. If he looks good, yeah, he's got a decent amount of trade value, but I think there's a world where the Marlins just look at it and say, if we can get a couple prospects that we really like and we get off the money, which I'm sure Bruce Sherman would probably, in a quiet room just to himself, if you're allowed to speak honestly, he'd probably say that he was never expecting to write a check for Sandy in August. Then maybe he ends up being an ideal fit. But even in that scenario, I'm not trading Mark Vientos for him, I don't think. I think you can get a deal done with prospects. I think you can get a deal done without trading from the absolute top of your farm system. Are you going to get a trade for Sandy done without giving up any of your position players like Jet Williams, Carson Bench, Jacob Reimer, Ryan Clifford? I don't think so. I think you'd probably have to have a deal centered around one of Clifford or Reimer. Maybe AJ Ewing. Those are all guys who are kind of fringe top 100, depending on the outlet you look at. I know for just baseball, we have Reimer in the top 100, and I think we had AJ Ewing as a just cut on our last update. We have another update coming actually today on Tuesday, so we'll see if those guys end up sneaking onto the list. But the point being, you can still center a package around a top 100 talent, potentially a couple of pitchers. I mean, you have the pieces in this farm system to make a move. You certainly do. It's just a matter of what you want to push your chips in for. And pushing your chips in for Sandy when he's got a 6.66 ERA right now, that doesn't on the surface seem like the best of moves. But Sandy's also a former Cy Young who still throws harder than most guys in baseball that can go into the Mets pitching lab. Maybe they can figure something out. And then all of a sudden, maybe he is the guy come October. Maybe he is the guy for the next 2 seasons. So I'm not entirely opposed to that one. Ultimately, I think the best fit is just to go out there and get Merrill Kelly. I think he's got the highest floor, and you just know he's going to be able to give you a chance every 5th day, and come October, give you a chance to win a playoff game. It's not going to be phased by the moment. He was great in the Diamondbacks run to the World Series in 2023, pitched to a 2.25 ERA. So that's the guy I think makes the most sense, but there could be heavy competition for him. So we'll just see what David Stearns comes up with. But right now, as the trade deadline's now, as you guys are listening to this, we're within 48 hours at this point, getting closer and closer. I guess it'll be 48 hours from 6:00 on Tuesday. There's a lot of conversations going on right now. The Mets had to figure out how to improve their pitching, though. I honestly think that their lineup is fine, and I don't see the bat that's out there that's going to unlock an extra gear. I actually think that there's more upside present with who's in that clubhouse right now than elsewhere. And it's just a matter of deciding, are you comfortable with Jeff McNeil as a center fielder for the rest of the season? And I think my answer right now would be yes. So I would be focusing all my assets and resources to getting a starting pitcher that actually will make a difference, to getting a top-end relief arm. And if you can pull off a deal for 2 relief arms or 2 separate deals to get a couple of relievers and get to a point where maybe Huascar Brazaban gets optioned down. You can't option Jose Buda. He's throwing the ball well, but if you picked up a couple arms, there might be a world eventually where you might have to have a long, hard conversation about Ryan Stanek. But the Mets could put themselves in a really good position if they add 2 more relievers. But if they just add 1 starting pitcher, 1 lights-out reliever, I think they've had an incredible deadline and they're ready to roll going forward. But as Martino reported today, at the bottom of his Mark Vientos article, he said the Mets are looking for starting pitcher, relievers, and maybe an upgrade in center. That's the blueprint. We'll see what they come up with come 6:00 on Thursday night. As always, thank you all for tuning in. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, help us get to the next goal of 14,000 subscribers. If you want to be Locked On Mets Insider, find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen, your first watch every day, not for your second watch. Head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything in the world of sports. We're talking about Locked On Sports Today, the local host from each team, league-wide host from each league. Find Locked On Sports Today streaming 24/7 on YouTube.